Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. A lot of people know Ian McDiarmid for his portrayal of Emperor Palpatine in the prequel and sequel trilogy. What less people know is that he also was the original Emperor Palpatine in 1983's Return of the Jedi. Marjorie Ian actually played Emperor Palpatine in the original Empire Strikes Back, but in later editions they reshot the scenes with McDiarmid, who was just 39 years old at the time when Return of the Jedi came out. And yes, that is what a 39-year-old man looked like in the 80s. I mean, it was a pretty rough time back then. They used to allow smoking on airplanes. Granted, they had a smoking section in the back, so it was just limited to the back, but it didn't really do anything. Anyway, Ian McDiarmid might have already looked like younger Senator Palpatine in the 1980s, but he somehow managed to stay youthful and healthy enough to play every edition of Palpatine afterwards. This is truly a remarkable story and a really remarkable person. Rarely do you see an individual star in the same character for 3 different generations. It's really awesome. Now, some sharp-eyed fans might notice that in Return of the Jedi, Emperor Palpatine doesn't even use a lightsaber. I mean, yes, he tries to goad Luke Skywalker into using a lightsaber, but he himself is not using one. And then, in the sequels, once again, he's not wielding a blade. This is very different from the Master Swordsman he portrays in the prequel era. You know, the individual who took out 3 highly skilled Jedi Masters within 5 seconds of engaging them. The same individual who ragdolled Maul and Savage Opress like they were completely inconsequential to him. You know, Palpatine, the crazy, spinning, Jarkai-wielding, Geo-Force dancing madman. And so why is it that after his injury in Duel with Mace Windu, we never really get to see him wield a lightsaber ever again? That's a loaded question, and here's what the wrong answer would be. Mace Windu reflecting the lightning back into Palpatine's face probably made Palpatine hate lightsabers or even fear them. Even if there is a sliver of truth to that information, there is another truth that predates that event. You see, Palpatine has always looked down on the lightsaber. He's seen it as an inferior tool. Take a look at his lightsaber during his reign as Chancellor. It's made out of iridium, a precious metal that is very much the gold standard in the Star Wars universe. I know this because sometime after 4000 BBY, the Republic would actually take the galactic credit off of the iridium standard, and shortly after, the age of financial engineering would begin. I'm just joking, I added that last bit. But the point here is Palpatine has created a weapon that is covered in essentially gold. It's fancy, it's ornate, but it's not really practical at all. I mean, generally speaking, people who put gold on weapons in our own world belong to a special group of murdering thugs and crazy dictators. A golden gun is neither intimidating nor is it considered a serious tool, even if it can insta-kill in one shot. A golden lightsaber like a golden gun deserves to be on a mantle. It's a piece to be looked at. It's not something you actually use. And so why would Palpatine have something like this? He wasn't a fool. He wasn't some low-level street thug or vain emperor who was obsessed with bling. Well, it all goes back to why he has that lightsaber in the first place. You see, Palpatine made this lightsaber while he was an apprentice to Darth Plagueis. It might be hard to see Palpatine as anything but the boss, but we all come from somewhere. I mean, this was Vin Diesel before he switched over from petrol. But the one thing that never really changed about Palpatine was his arrogance and confidence in himself. He would do his master's bidding by learning how to build a lightsaber, and he clearly knows how to use one. And being a pragmatic individual, he actually has a backup lightsaber made and hidden in his office, just in case. But Palpatine actually believed that lightsabers were tools that weak Force users needed to depend on. He believed a truly powerful Sith Lord should not have to use such rudimentary tools to defeat their enemies. And I don't mean that like Emperor Palpatine just believed in shooting Sith lightning into people's faces like some Sith Lords do. He also kind of looked down on that, but not as much. What Palpatine truly believed in was that a perfect defeat was when your enemy doesn't even know you're the one behind their demise. And if you know even the slightest thing about Palpatine's shenanigans as a senator and as a chancellor for the Republic, you'll know that describes him to the T. I mean, he proves his point when he literally destroys the Republic and most of the Jedi as the Chancellor of the very Republic the Jedi were supposed to protect. If that isn't masterful, I don't know what is. By the way, Palpatine, like big missed opportunity a few years ago not to start your own masterclass on how to subvert a democracy and turn it into an empire. And so Palpatine designed his lightsabers in such an ornate way because he didn't really take the process that seriously. He wasn't looking to design the optimal lightsaber. He was bored and decided as a patron of the arts to design a regal-looking lightsaber fit for a supreme chancellor of the old Republic era, knowing very well that he could never actually wield these as the chancellor because they're fucking red. I mean, seriously, This looks like a blade that the Grand Master of the Jedi Order would have held during the High Republic. And so, like a lot of things that Palpatine does, this is just an insult, a very thinly veiled insult, not only towards the Jedi mocking their lightsabers, but also, like, he's mocking Darth Plagueis as well. He would eventually actually use that lightsaber to murder him. And I'm not bullshitting you guys, like, after he successfully takes over the galaxy, he just removes all the iridium on his lightsabers and coats it in a black material, making it a lot more functional. And so yeah, when Palpatine duels the Jedi in his office, he uses a lightsaber as a mockery of the Jedi, believe it or not. This would mean that Palpatine chooses to duel the Jedi instead of killing them in a much easier and more efficient way, which he totally could have. He probably could have set a trap of some kind. Which further makes me think that he did in fact lose the Mace Windu on purpose, or knew at least that Mace Windu would be the perfect foil to his Form 7 Juyo lightsaber technique. I guess ultimately it doesn't really matter whether Palpatine planned this or not. What mattered was the end result, which was having Anakin turn to the dark side. Now, whether Palpatine is right or not to scorn the lightsaber is up to debate. Palpatine must have been familiar with Jedi teaching somewhat, and we've talked about this from time to time as well, but the Jedi chose a lightsaber not because it was the most powerful or easy weapon to use. As a matter of fact, the lightsaber is used because it's the exact opposite. It takes years to train with and get used to. And that's the point. I mean, the Jedi viewed their own powers as a very dangerous thing. And over the years, they created more and more structure within their order to ensure that their members wouldn't turn to the dark side, because every time that happened, it created massive amounts of destruction. This also turned into a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways, but it makes sense. I mean, how you train a soldier to use a weapon and think will create different outcomes on the battlefield. And the Jedi were very interested in a specific type of outcome. Former Army Ranger and military historian Dave Grossman is famous for his book on killing, in which he interviews thousands of combat soldiers from World War II. He found that only about 15 to 20% of the individuals he talked to fired at the enemy willingly. The rest were not necessarily cowards. These soldiers still held the line. They were willing to assume great risks to save their brothers in combat, retrieve more ammo and stuff like that. But they generally tried to avoid shooting at the enemy, even in very hectic situations like during a banzai charge. Now, the methods of his interview are not scientific. I respect these men, obviously, for their service, but I don't trust interviews, like first-person accounts of their own past. They're notoriously inaccurate. Plus, if I'm a grandfather who fought in World War II, I might not want my family knowing that I killed a lot of people. Anyway. But if these findings have even a little truth to them, it kind of reshapes how we view World War II GIs. Now, modern combat soldiers from Vietnam onwards don't seem to have a similar issue, and this is reportedly because soldiers are now trained to shoot at human targets rather than just regular target shooting sheets that were used in World War II. There is a theory that during World War II, most of the soldiers were devout Christians and taught killing was a really bad sin, and so no matter how much Uncle Sam tells you can go shoot those Nazis, a lot of them still followed their own beliefs. By the time the Vietnam War started, the country was far less devout. But if you take a look at homicide rates in the United States, homicide rates in the 1920s and 30s leading up to World War II were as high as they were in the 80s and 90s during the crack epidemic. If anything, the Vietnam era, or at least the early period, was remarkably void of homicides. It had some of the lowest homicide rates in the last 100 years, aside from like the early 2000s until now. And so, by the way, when politicians say, oh, America's super dangerous, we're collapsing, everything is getting terrible. Guys, in the 80s, mortgage rates were double digits, as high as 20%. Homicide rates were crazy. Things might look bad, but they were much worse back then. Longer view of history will show you that. Anyway, the point is how you train your soldier to handle their weapon. Even the targets that they fire will affect how they act in combat. And had the Jedi just handed out blasters to their Padawan, well, if you liked Equilibrium's gun kata, you'll probably love watching the Jedi with guns. Until you realize in horror that maybe they're too efficient at killing people, then that it's unfair and getting grotesque and a bit too gruesome. They wouldn't look all that different from John Wick blasting through fools at an alarmingly quick rate. And that makes sense, because a blaster is one of the most efficient killing tools money can buy. It really allows people to kill with impunity. In the old days, you still had to muster up enough strength to swing a club at someone to kill them. Now any punk can just squeeze a trigger and become a warrior. And if you think about it, for a Jedi, it's already extremely easy for them to kill people. That's just the truth. They have magical force abilities. And so giving them A weapon that makes it even easier makes absolutely no sense. That's how you create monsters. Bring in a lightsaber and the situation changes completely. Not only does every Jedi have to bond to their kyber crystal through a gathering ceremony, their kyber crystals are also completely aware of a Jedi's biggest fears and weaknesses. And when a Jedi uses a lightsaber, it's not just an empty energy laser sword. A Jedi's force must flow through the kyber, which acts like a conduit, and a Jedi must control that flow of energy as it emerges out of the blade like it was some kind of out-of-control hose. And so when a Jedi cuts another individual, they actually feel the heat of the blade going through another person's flesh. They might even feel that pain. There's actually a feedback loop, which makes it kind of unpleasant to use a lightsaber. The Jedi adopted the lightsaber not because it's easy to use, they adopted it because it makes every kill extremely hard, and it makes every Jedi be very active and conscious participants in the act of killing. The Jedi value life. This is why they take death so seriously. Of course, a Sith Lord like Palpatine would see restraint and discipline like this as a weakness, but I think not even Palpatine realizes the real reason why he hates the use of lightsabers so much. If you really think about it, up until the rise of the New Order, Palpatine has been hiding his true nature. He's been whining and dining with the elites of the galaxy. He's been helping Darth Plagueis raise funds for their mission. He's been the public face of the Sith agenda, as well as serving as the senator from Naboo and later on the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. And so the more simple reason why Palpatine does not like lightsabers is because lightsabers have never really been something that he could use. Especially in the earlier years, he just couldn't rely on having that weapon at his side at all time. Yes, he had those lightsabers hidden in his office should things go hairy, but what if he's in the Jedi Temple? What if he's on a mission with a bunch of Jedi, or just getting rescued by a few Jedi? You see, Palpatine really had to embrace this idea of living without a lightsaber because it would expose him immediately. There were probably many moments where Sheev Palpatine was almost revealed as Darth Sidious, Lord of the Sith. And had Sidious had a lightsaber at his disposal, had he had the mentality to use it if he actually liked fighting with a lightsaber, those are all factors that would have made it easier for him to make that mistake. And so by not having an option to use the lightsaber in the first place in most scenarios, Palpatine trained his political and social savvy and instead manipulated people just using his good old brain. And when that wasn't enough, well, he always had his Force powers. And this was just another huge difference between the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi respected the Force. They believed that it was the Force's universe they were living in. The Sith, on the other hand, believed that they were all powerful and the Force should bend to their will. This is why the Sith were always okay with directly wielding the Force, whereas the Jedi prefer to use their lightsabers as a conduit. And this is why the Sith would use techniques like Force Lightning, Force Choke, Force Scream, and many other techniques. Techniques that the Jedi would see as perverse, because using the Force to kill someone, well, that creates imbalance. This is why, at most, the Jedi just use Force Push and a few other more non-invasive techniques. This is also why the Sith are generally going to be a lot more powerful than their Jedi counterparts. One side respects power and self-restraint, the other side goes all in. So there you have it, guys. That is Palpatine's view on lightsabers. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Is he full of shit, or is he actually onto something? I mean, after all, this guy is a master swordsman. He has the experience and skills to make this judgment, I would say. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.